Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever wondered why, despite all your intentions, despite all your dreams, despite all the goals you've written down and the promises you've made to yourself, you are still stuck? Exactly where you've been for months, maybe even years. I am not here to flatter you. I am here to confront you with a truth that most people avoid because it hurts too much. The truth is, the reason you're still stuck isn't fate, it isn't bad luck, and it sure as hell isn't because the world has conspired against you. You are stuck because of you. And until you face that reality with brutal honesty, nothing will ever change. Now, I don't say that to discourage you. I say it because I've spent decades studying the human brain, the body, and behavior. I've seen how people repeat the same patterns year after year, trapped in their own cycles, and they don't even realize it. They think they're cursed. They think they lack opportunity. They think they need more time, more money, more connections. But what they really lack is the willingness to break the loop of their own excuses. Let me tell you something about the brain. The brain is a prediction machine. Its entire function is to keep you alive by predicting what comes next. If you've lived your life running on fear, your brain is going to predict more fear. If you've lived your life procrastinating, your brain will expect you to procrastinate again tomorrow. If you've lived small, your brain will convince you that small is safe. And anything else is a threat. This is why you're still stuck. You have literally programmed yourself into stagnation. And it feels familiar, it feels safe, but it's killing your potential. You wake up, you go through your day, you talk about your big dreams, you even consume content like this, convincing yourself you're working on your future, but what you're actually doing is spinning your wheels in the mud. Your brain gives you dopamine every time you imagine the life you want, and that small chemical hit fools you into believing you're progressing. But imagining success and executing on success are not the same. Visualization is worthless without action. That's why so many of you have journals full of goals, vision boards filled with pretty pictures, motivational quotes plastered on your walls, but your reality hasn't changed. You are mistaking mental stimulation for real-world execution. Think about this. Why is it that two people can come from the same background, face the same hardships, live in the same neighborhood, but one ends up building an empire while the other spends his life making excuses? I'll tell you why. It's not about intelligence. It's not about opportunity. It's about decisions. One person decided that their past was not going to define them. They decided to use pain as fuel. They decided to act relentlessly, even when it was uncomfortable. The other person, they decided to remain comfortable. They decided that survival was enough. They decided that excuses were easier than responsibility. I've seen this in neuroscience studies. When people are confronted with difficult decisions, the brain lights up in areas responsible for fear. But in the most successful people, we see something different. Their brain adapts faster. Their threshold for discomfort is higher, and they've trained themselves to push through. Not because they were born that way. They reprogrammed their brain by taking action over and over again until fear became background noise. Let me give you a real-world example. I once worked with a man who had been trying to start his business for over 5 years. Every time I saw him, he had a new excuse. I'm waiting for the right timing. I need more savings first. I need to learn more. He was paralyzed by preparation. He lived in what I call the land of almost. He almost launched. He almost hired. He almost changed. Do you know where he ended up? Exactly where he started. Meanwhile, another man I worked with who had half the resources didn't wait. He jumped. He risked. He made mistakes. And within 3 years, he had built a company that provided jobs for dozens of people. What's the difference? One man waited for the perfect moment. The other created it. The reason you're still stuck is because you've confused motion with progress. You're busy, but you're not productive. You're doing things that make you feel like you're moving forward, but deep down, you know they're not pushing you out of your rut. You rearrange your schedule, you read another book, you attend another seminar, you scroll through another motivational clip, and when it comes to the one thing that actually matters, taking the uncomfortable step, you stop cold. Ladies and gentlemen, being stuck is not a condition, it's a decision. It is the decision to do what is easy instead of what is necessary. It is the decision to prioritize temporary comfort over long-term growth. It is the decision to lie to yourself about why you are where you are. And the worst lie you tell yourself is this: I'll start tomorrow. That sentence has killed more dreams than failure ever has. You want to know the most dangerous place for a human being? It's not rock bottom. At rock bottom, you're forced to change. The most dangerous place is comfortable misery. That middle ground where you're not happy, but you're not desperate enough to act. That's where dreams go to die. That's where potential rots away slowly. That's where most of the world is stuck right now, numb, half alive, waiting for some external miracle that will never come. And the tragedy is some of you are so close to breaking free. You're one bold move away from rewriting your story, but you keep sabotaging yourself because of fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of losing the little comfort you have. But fear is just your brain predicting danger based on outdated programming. It's not real. It's a biological illusion meant to protect you. And the moment you understand that, you realize that fear has no power unless you give it power. I've looked at the data. I've seen studies where people imagine worst case scenarios, and 90% of the time, those scenarios never actually happen. And yet, they let those imagined fears chain them down for years. Can you imagine how insane that is? Living a small life, denying yourself greatness, all because of scenarios that never even occur. But here's the good news. Just as your brain can program you into stagnation, it can also be rewired into execution. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, proves that you are not condemned to your patterns. Every time you take an action outside of your comfort zone, you carve a new neural pathway. At first, it feels awkward, even painful, because your brain resists change. But if you repeat it enough, that new pathway becomes the default. What was once terrifying becomes natural. What was once impossible becomes automatic. This is how real transformation happens. Not by waiting for motivation, not by praying for the right conditions, but by forcing yourself into action repeatedly until your brain catches up. Motivation is unreliable. Discipline is non-negotiable. You don't need to feel like doing it. You need to do it until you feel like it. You are still stuck because you have made comfort your God. You worship safety. You've traded your potential for a guaranteed paycheck, for the approval of people who don't even care about your future, for the temporary numbing of your phone, your television, your distractions. But at the end of the night, when it's just you and your thoughts, you know the truth. You know you were built for more. And that silent frustration you feel, that's your potential screaming at you, begging you to stop betraying it. Now I want you to picture your life 10 years from now if nothing changes. Same job, same excuses, same habits, same regrets. Imagine the weight of that reality pressing on your chest. That is where you're headed if you don't act. And I want you to feel that discomfort right now, because discomfort is the birthplace of transformation. If you don't allow yourself to feel that pain, you'll never have the urgency to change. But I also want you to imagine the opposite. 10 years from now, you finally broke the cycle. You made the hard choices. You faced the fear. You executed consistently. And now you're living the life that once felt impossible. That life exists. It is waiting. But it won't come to you. You must go to it. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the moment of truth. Right now, in this room, your brain is trying to decide what to do with these words. One part of you is inspired, ready to act. Another part is already making excuses. This was powerful, but I'll think about it later. That is the voice that has kept you stuck. And the only way you break free is by killing that voice with action. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. Because the reason you're still stuck isn't that you don't know what to do. You already know. Deep down, you know. The problem is you keep waiting for the right time, the right feeling, the right level of confidence. But the right time is never coming. The only time you have is this one. Right here, right now. And if you don't seize this moment, you'll walk out of here and go right back to your patterns. You'll feel a spark for a few hours, maybe even a couple of days, but then life will distract you. Your brain will whisper, stay safe. Don't risk it. Don't change. And you'll obey. That's how you've trained yourself. But today can be the day you train yourself differently. So let me take you deeper into how your mind works. The human brain loves patterns, even if they're destructive. That's why someone can stay in a toxic relationship for years, or in a job they hate, or a lifestyle that's killing them, because the brain craves predictability more than it craves happiness. Happiness is secondary to safety. Safety is the brain's default priority. That means the very organ designed to keep you alive is also the organ keeping you stuck, unless you learn to override it. And how do you override it? You shock it. You disrupt the cycle. You do something your brain doesn't expect. You act boldly, decisively, before the fear has time to talk you out of it. That's why some of the most successful people in history made what looked like reckless decisions at the time. They quit, they moved, they invested, they risked, and everyone thought they were insane. But they weren't insane. They understood that waiting would kill them faster than failing ever could. I'll tell you a story. Years ago, a young man sat in one of my lectures. He was broke, heavily in debt, depressed, and living with his parents. He told me he felt stuck, that he'd been stuck for years. And I asked him one question. What's the one thing you've been afraid to do that you know could change your life? He looked at me and said, start my own company. I told him, then do it. Not tomorrow, not next month, do it this week. He hesitated, of course. His brain screamed at him with 1,000 reasons why it wasn't possible, but he took the leap anyway. Today, he runs a multi-million-dollar business. Not because he had some genius idea, not because he had rich parents or endless resources, because he stopped letting fear dictate his future. You think you need more confidence to start. You don't. Confidence doesn't come before action. Confidence comes from action. You build it like a muscle. You take a step, you see you didn't die. You take another step, and slowly you start believing in yourself. But if you wait for confidence before acting, you'll wait forever. Now let's talk about another trap, identity. Many of you are stuck because you have changed yourself to an outdated identity. You say things like, I'm just not that kind of person, or I'm not cut out for that, or I've always been this way. That's a lie. You are not your past. You are not your habits. You are not even your thoughts. You are the decisions you make today. Neuroscience shows that the brain can rewire itself at any age. That means the identity you cling to is nothing more than a story you've repeated long enough to believe. But stories can be rewritten. I once spoke with a woman who told me she had never been confident. She carried that belief for decades. But when I asked her to describe a moment where she did something courageous, she told me about saving her younger brother from drowning when she was a teenager. I stopped her right there and said, that's confidence, that's courage. Don't ever say you've never had it. And it hit her. She wasn't lacking confidence. She was just clinging to the story that she lacked it. The moment she changed the story, she changed her life. So let me ask you, what story are you telling yourself that's keeping you stuck? That you're too old, too young, too poor, too uneducated, too broken? Every one of those is a self-imposed cage, and the key has been in your hand the entire time. And then there's another reason you're stuck. The people you surround yourself with. The human brain mirrors its environment. If you're surrounded by people who settle, who complain, who justify mediocrity, you will mirror them, whether you realize it or not. This isn't just psychology, it's biology. Mirror neurons in your brain literally fire when you observe the behavior of others. That means you are becoming the people you spend most of your time with. If you want to break free, sometimes that means walking away. Sometimes it means cutting ties. Sometimes it means being alone for a while until you find people who challenge you, who force you to rise. But here's the painful truth. Most of you would rather stay stuck with familiar people than grow alone. You would rather have company in misery than solitude in growth. And that's why you stay where you are, because you're more loyal to your circle than you are to your future. I've seen this destroy brilliant minds. I once mentored a man who had everything it took to succeed. Sharp, disciplined, hardworking, but his friends mocked his ambition, dragged him out drinking, ridiculed him when he said no. He told me he didn't want to lose them. And I told him, if you don't lose them, you'll lose yourself. He didn't listen. He stayed. 10 years later, I ran into him again. Same job, same paycheck. Same complaints. And the saddest part, the same friends. He chose comfort over growth. Ladies and gentlemen, the science is clear. Growth requires stress. Muscles only grow when they are torn down and rebuilt. The immune system only strengthens when it fights off threats. The brain only rewires itself when challenged. Everything in biology screams the same truth. Comfort is decay, stress is growth. So if you're stuck, it's because you've designed your life around avoiding stress. You think struggle is a sign of failure, when in reality, it's the birthplace of transformation. I know what some of you are thinking right now. This all sounds powerful, but you don't know my situation. You don't know my past. You don't know my obstacles. You're right. I don't. But I've worked with people who had every reason to stay stuck, and they didn't. I've seen people who lost everything, health, family, money, and they still found a way to rebuild. You don't need a perfect past. You don't need perfect conditions. You need a decision. And I'll prove it to you with research. Studies on post-traumatic growth show that people who endure the most devastating hardships often emerge stronger, wiser, and more driven than those who live comfortably. The trauma forced them to change. It forced them to adapt. It forced them to dig deeper than they ever thought possible. In other words, adversity gave them access to parts of themselves that comfort never could. So maybe the reason you're stuck is because your life is too comfortable. You've never been forced to fight. You've never been backed into a corner with no choice but to transform. And if that's the case, then you need to manufacture that urgency yourself. You need to create the pressure before life creates it for you. Because life will. Life will eventually slap you awake, and by then it may be too late. Let me make this as raw as I can. Your excuses are killing you. Slowly, quietly, but killing you nonetheless. And the only antidote is action. Relentless, consistent, uncomfortable action. That's the medicine. That's the cure. That's the only way out of the quicksand you're in. And if you're sitting here thinking, I hear you, but I don't know where to start, I'll tell you exactly where to start. Start with the thing you've been avoiding. Start with the conversation you've been afraid to have. Start with the step you've been putting off. You already know what it is. Your brain has been screaming it at you for years, but you keep running from it. Stop running. Do it. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. Because if you don't, the years will pass, and you'll look back with regret so heavy it will crush you. You'll wish you had taken the leap. You'll wish you had ignored the fear. You'll wish you had broken the cycle when you had the chance. Don't wait for that day. Don't let regret be your teacher. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason you're still stuck is not because you can't change. It's because you've refused to change. But in this moment right now, you can decide differently. You can step out of the prison of comfort and into the battlefield of growth. It won't be easy. It will hurt. You will stumble. You will doubt. But you will move, and movement is life. So the question is simple. Will you keep betraying your potential, or will you finally rise?